What's up, guys? I'm LQ. This is the LQ Review. Thank you so much for joining me here at my YouTube channel. This is where I talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff that I love to talk about. Movies, video games, comic books, TV shows. If it's geeky, if it's nerdy, I love to talk about it right here. And right now, I'm going to do a ranking video. Yes, a ranking video. It's been a while since I've done one, but I was thinking the other day, what is the best Star Trek series? Because I've been coming down really hard on Star Trek Lower Decks. I haven't bothered to watch the most recent episode. I'm not going to. It's bad enough that I had to give up on it. So I was like, okay, well, I know Lower Decks is my least favorite. What's my favorite? So I thought, hey, let's sit down and let's rank the Star Trek series. So that's what I did, and I'm going to share with you my ranking of the Star Trek series from worst to best, and kind of see if you agree. So let's start with let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's been 9 series. So let's start with number 9, and that's Lower Decks. Lower Decks is poop. It's just straight poop. It's like my dog went outside, pooped in the yard, and then the director of Lower Decks came out, scooped it up, and said, let's put this on CBS All Access. And boom, there it is. Lower Decks is trash. Let's move on. Let's see. Number 8. Number 8 is Star Trek The Animated Series. That's not to say I hated it. The only one on here that I hate is Lower Decks. Star Trek The Animated Series tried to be a continuation of the original series. And it tried to have the same feel, tried to have the same story, the same storytelling methods. It just didn't always work for me because of the cheap animation. I mean, it almost felt like, and it might have been Filmation, but if it wasn't Filmation, it felt like Filmation. It felt very cheap, very stock animation, and it just didn't work for me. Even though a lot of the voice actors were the same voice actors who voiced the original series, it just didn't work for me. And I've tried to watch it, and I have watched it all the way through once. I've tried to watch it since, and I just can't. I have a hard time revisiting it. So yeah, Star Trek The Animated Series, while I didn't hate it, I respected it for what it was, it just didn't work for me. Moving to number 7, and that's Star Trek Discovery. Guys, there's stuff to like about Star Trek Discovery. Star Trek Discovery feels very cinematic. It feels very big. There's a lot going on here, and it really, pardon the pun, it really shoots for the stars. It really takes a big swing, and it doesn't always work, and it doesn't feel like Star Trek at all. And that's my biggest problem with Star Trek Discovery, is it doesn't feel like Star Trek. It's kind of some of that Lower Deck stuff. It has on the Star Trek clothes, but it doesn't feel like Star Trek. Now, where Lower Deck is just offensive to Star Trek, Discovery just tries to take it in a new direction, and it's failing. So I wouldn't call it offensive to Star Trek. I would just say that it's trying something and it's not working. I'm going to watch season 3 when it comes out. I liked season 1. Season 2, not so much. It's the whole shtick, the whole Discovery shtick started to wear on me in season 2. But I'm going to watch season 3 because I liked 1 and 2 enough to continue it. But it just doesn't feel like Star Trek. It doesn't give me that sense of wonder. It doesn't give me that sense of inspiration. Star Trek is supposed to inspire, and there's nothing inspiring about Discovery. So, there it is. Next on the list is Star Trek Voyager. Yep, I know some people might have Voyager higher. Voyager happened at a time in my life when I was never really out of Star Trek, but I guess I was maybe a little burned out on it. I mean, you gotta remember that you had the Next Generation, you had the Next Generation movie, and then they went right into the Next Generation movies. You had Deep Space Nine, you had Voyager, you had a whole bunch of Star Trek content happening at once, and the Star Trek content got really big. Think about the Dominion Wars, think about what was going on with the Borg, think about all this big stuff that was happening, and I got a little burned out on it. I mean, I watched it, and there was some cool stuff in it. 7 and 9 is one of my favorite characters in Star Trek. The Voyager, I always enjoyed the Voyager's interaction with the Borg, but it just felt drawn out. Voyager felt drawn out to me. I think it ran for, 7 seasons, and I think they could have told that story in 3 or 4. It just felt drawn out to me. So I liked Voyager, but out of all the seasons that come ahead of Voyager on my ranking, I will revisit them more often than I will revisit Voyager. So there it is. Next on my list, fifth, you've got Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Star Trek Deep Space Nine almost feels like a companion piece to The Next Generation, and that's one of the reasons why I really like it. Yeah, remember, the first episode of Deep Space Nine was the Battle of Wolf. The aftermath of what happened there, and Cisco, how that put Cisco's life on a different trajectory. And while Deep Space Nine didn't have the same excitement, for me anyways, as Star Trek The Next Generation did, because Star Trek Next Generation is out exploring, and Deep Space Nine is kind of a stay in one place TV show based on who comes here instead of where we're going. It still had its moments that I really enjoyed. So Star Trek Deep Space Nine is number 5. Number 4 is Star Trek Enterprise. Guys, I love Star Trek Enterprise. Star Trek Enterprise was... It came out at the right time for me. I talked about a time during when I kind of got burned out on Star Trek, especially during the later years of Voyager. Well, Deep Space, or Enterprise, kind of reignited that flame for me. And it kind of pulled me right back into Star Trek, especially how the early episodes really attempted to tie to Star Trek mythology. I mean, Enterprise did a good job of doing that throughout its run. But remember, it even had Zefram Cochrane from Star Trek First Contact make a cameo in the first episode. I mean, Star Trek Enterprise was like a love letter to Star Trek fans. And it had a lot of payoff in it, and the later episodes really started to do a great job of bridging that gap to the original series. And I loved it, and I loved the fact that they did that. And the last episode, I don't know. Can I spoil the last episode here? I'm not going to. Last episode was phenomenal. Was phenomenal. So yeah, Star Trek Enterprise was great. I really enjoyed it. Captain Archer is one of my favorite captains, and great series. Moving on to number 3, Star Trek Picard. I know this is probably going to be blasphemous for some people because it is CBS All Access. And they don't get Star Trek. And I agree, CBS, they do not currently get Star Trek. They don't understand it. They don't understand this property that they have. And they don't know what to do with it. I gotta tell you, Star Trek Picard did a pretty good job of hitting all the right beats, though. It felt... For the most part, it felt like Star Trek. It took a beloved character and brought him on an interesting journey. It took another beloved character and ended his journey. You'll know who I'm talking about if you've seen Star Trek Picard. Had some fun cameos, some people that we've recognized, and it really furthered the Next Generation storyline. And I appreciated that. So, I mean, it could all crash and burn in Season 2. And if it does, we could see this go from my 3rd favorite down lower. But right now, Picard's my 3rd favorite Star Trek series. I'm sorry. It just is. Like I said, for the most part, it feels like Star Trek, but it still tries to do things that are anti-Star Trek. I mean, watching Picard and watching the way that people interact with each other in Picard, it makes me feel like society has regressed. You know, we're not a progressive society anymore, we've regressed. That's what it makes me feel like. And that's a bummer, because I always felt like the world that the Next Generation inhabited was a world where mankind had become better. And I did not get that sense at all watching Picard. But for the most part, it felt like Star Trek. Alright, my number 2 Star Trek series, it's time for the controversy to come out. It's time, but my number 2 is definitely Star Trek The Original Series. And you know what? I love it. I love Star Trek The Original Series. I've got the DVD box sets, and I've watched them, and I love them, and I've seen them, and I grew up with them. My mom was a big Trekkie. I grew up with Kirk. I grew up with Spock. I grew up with Bones, Chekhov. I mean, these are icons from my childhood. But it was also, even when I was a kid, I knew that what I was watching was antiquated. Even when I was a kid, I knew that what I was watching was dated. And that's kind of where my issues come in. Yet there's some nostalgia there for these characters, to be sure. And the storytelling was very good. Space Seed with Khan is still one of my favorite Star Trek stories, movies and TV shows. There's a lot of great stuff there. The Doomsday Machine. Oh, so good. So good. There's so many classic Trek episodes that I mean, we could talk about. I could make a video ranking my top 10 favorite original series episodes. I might do that. That's a good idea, but it's not as good as my number one. And my number one is Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that's simply because that's my Star Trek. That's my Star Trek. That's the Star Trek I grew up with. Star Trek Next Generation premiered when I was 8 years old. I grew up with it. I became a Star Trek fan watching the adventures of Picard on the USS Enterprise D. That's how I became a fan. I remember we would watch Star Trek The Next Generation on its original run. Me and my mom would. My mom is a big Trekkie, and every night, I think it came on Thursday nights? I think it was Thursday nights, but every night that it came on, we watched it on its original run. I remember I remember like it was yesterday, watching Encounter at Farpoint for the first time, and watching Picard on that turbo lift, and him walking off and thinking, man, is he a little old to be a captain? Not even thinking, like, because I was so, Kirk was my dude. Kirk was my dude. And then we saw Picard, and then all of a sudden, there was a new Star Trek. There was a new Star Trek, and it was my Star Trek. And I grew up watching it. Yeah, I still had the movies. Remember, the original series movies were running along in theaters alongside Star Trek Next Generation. For a brief time, we had both of them putting out new content. But Star Trek Next Generation is my Star Trek. Picard is my captain. And no Star Trek will ever be able to beat The Next Generation just because of the nostalgia factor. For right or wrong, that's just the way it is. But that's okay, guys. What is your favorite Star Trek? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your take on it. And make sure you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you for joining me here at the Oki Review, where we talk about the geeky, nerdy stuff we love to talk about. Till next time, we'll see you later.